Greetings and good evening. My name is Joelle, and this is the Psychic Inside Show. We're here every Tuesday on the Blog Talk Radio Network under the moniker The Viberarian Radio. I'm here to bring programming that I believe will be enlightening and elevating and uplifting, and I'm glad that you could tune in this evening. Now, the line to call in to listen or to ask questions is 646-787-8436, and you can call if you have something you want to say. Just go ahead and press the 1 button, #1, and that'll let me know to bring you on the air. And also, we've got a chat room that's going, and you can join me on Facebook and also on Instagram, where I have put together a community of people who I like to call the Good Vibe Tribe. That's those of us who are here to uplift and to make everyone's day a little brighter. If you're in any of those social communities, definitely please give me a shout-out when you see something that you want passed on. It's all about amplification and spreading. I think positivity is what I'm certainly here to do, and I invite you to do that by hitting the hashtag either Get Lifted or hashtag Good Vibe Tribe, and certainly come find us on Facebook. Now, these shows on the Viberarian Radio Network are also available through the podcast directories on iTunes and also on the Viberarian Radio on YouTube. All of our shows are there for you to tune into at a later date when you might want to come back and check out something you were only able to hear a little bit about. So anyway, on Tuesday evenings, the Psychic Inside Show is an opportunity for me to talk to people who have really had some very interesting journeys. I believe that everyone is psychic and that you're born with certain gifts and abilities. You just don't always recognize it. So by hearing what it looks like for other people to kind of come into a thing that inspires you and encourages you as you step further into embracing who and all that you could be. Now, every Tuesday on the Psychic Inside Show, I have been sitting down and talking with people who I have met either in person or who I have heard of from other people or seen about online, people who have sparked my curiosity. So a couple months ago, I was at one of my favorite places. As you know, I like to talk about the Big Blue Barn and Gloria Parker's Big Psychic Fair up in Roswell, Georgia. It's a great event. I can't tell you how many wonderful people that I have met through the years over there. So one of the names that caught my eye in January, I didn't get an actual opportunity to sit down for a reading, but I had bookmarked the name because it struck me as unusual. And in just a moment, I'll tell you what her name is. But just a few days after that encounter, when I'd seen that name, I got an inquiry on Instagram that said, hey, I'd like to connect with you. And so through our initial chats and conversations, I finally came to understand that the very person whose name had caught my attention at that fair was now having a conversation with me. So I felt that it was very aligned. And the name that I heard and saw that caught my eye was that of Shiva. So my guest this evening is Shiva Jahaan. Am I pronouncing that correct, Shiva? Welcome to the Psychic Inside Show.
Thank you so much. I'm so grateful to be here.
Now, your last name, am I saying Jahaan correctly?
Yes. And I want to point out that this is my psychic name.
Yes, okay. So we're many people in the profession who do readings and are operating partially only as a psychic in a part-time capacity or under ways will have their psychic name, and that's kind of what the medical physical community begins to know people by. Now, Shiva was the first name. It actually caught my eye because I honestly do not know a lot about Shiva, but I know that there is a path or religious practice where he is an important figure, and I had seen a couple pictures and things depicted in the weeks leading up to when I saw your name. So I feel like there's something I'm supposed to know about Shiva. And since you selected this purposely to be your name, can you share as to why and enlighten me some about Shiva?
Yes, absolutely. So I was raised with the Hindu faith, and Lord Shiva is part of the Hindu triad, which is Vishnu, Shiva, and Brahma. And Shiva is
so I was saying it wrong. I was saying it wrong, correct? So it's Shiva or
Shiva.
Shiva? Oh, Shiva. Okay, thank you.
It's okay. So Shiva in Hinduism is known as a destroyer of many things. But he's also destroyer of ego. And with regards to spirituality, ego is basically fear. All negative emotions, when you go to the root of it, is rooted in fear. So he is the destroyer of that. And Shiva also represents consciousness. So he is the one that raises our consciousness, so therefore we raise our vibration. In my life, I can tell you, he is also associated with justice, and he plays a very big role in my life, and I am deeply connected to him. And he also represents the divine masculine.
Okay.
Of
there's
the twin
many
flame,
paths in that. Yes.
Yes. Shiva is very complicated to understand, and quite elusive when you read about him.
And so in aligning with that energy and that exploration of Shiva, why did you land on that? If you are comfortable disclosing, it might be a very personal spiritual question, but was it just I know that the justice was important to you, but was it given to you by your guides through like your higher self aspect, or it just really it embodied such an element that was perfect for all the things that you were embodying at the moment that you decided to come under that umbrella, if you will?
Everything that you just said, but also it's because I'm so deeply connected to him, and he plays such a huge role in my life and my career, actually my entire life. And Jahaan is the name I have given to my twin flame. So those two together represent the divine masculine, yes.
Oh, beautiful. And I'd also seen Shiva in a reference in the twin flame communities of people posting and talking about him and his beloved. So that is, kind of was the tickler for me, but I really had not done any study into that dynamic. So in terms of the destroyer of fear, right? So as a person where I know from your bio that you said that you were not always psychic, that your psychic awareness was triggered when you encountered your twin flame. How recently are you kind of to the whole psychic reality?
So I was always empathic. I've always been an empath, and I think a lot of psychics who awaken later in life, that's true. They're always empathic. So I always was able to read people and get feelings from people. I spiritually started awakening right about 2 years ago. Okay. And I started feeling different in September of 2016. And by February of 2017 is when my awakening really started. And it was my twin flame, his energy coming into my life, that started awakening me. And it was very jarring.
Were you aware this is like you post interaction being able to explain it, but at the time, did you have any kind of context for what happened, and how did your psychic gift then manifest? Was it instantaneous then, clairaudience or clairvoyance, in addition to your natural empathy? Or did it gradually kind of, after that point, become something that you were like, oh, I can do this, let me explore more?
Well, I had started working with a psychic some months prior because my guides had aligned me with that energetically. And with regards to my twin, he wasn't somebody that I had just met. I had known him from some years prior through a job that I was at, and he wasn't somebody who was significant in my life. I felt the connection, but I didn't know what that was. I had never even heard of a twin flame. And it was just about 2 years ago is when I started feeling his energy coming in, and there was a phone call between him and I, and we were just having random conversation. And like I said, he wasn't a significant person in my life. And during this phone call is when a lot of emotions started bubbling up. And I can tell you that I honestly felt like I was going crazy. And I went the next day and I spoke to the psychic that I had been working with, and she told me, she said, he's your twin flame. And I was like, okay, I don't know what that is. And she explained it to me. And so since that was the beginning, I started awakening, and everything happened for me very, very quickly. It was a huge amount of growth in not a lot of time. And when we get our psychic abilities, they do it very slowly. It starts to come in very slowly. So it was the clairaudience that came in first, the claircognizance came in, and the clairsentience came in, along with my empathy that just skyrocketed.
Okay. So that was in the empathy after the trigger, was that pretty much then turned all the way up after that spark moment, so to speak?
Yes.
And when you say that you...
I'm sorry.
Well, I was going to say, when you talked about, when you said that you thought you had gone mad, what could you, I guess, be a little more detailed? Because, you know, if something happens that makes you doubt your mental sanity, that's certainly a common thing across the board, but everybody's kind of looks a little unique to you. So I don't know if you have a way of explaining why you had that feeling. Okay.
Yes, I felt like I was on the edge of insanity probably for about a year and a half. And a lot of that had to do with the twin flame dynamic. Okay. If you want me to go into detail, I can.
Well, I know, like, for me, hearing things, like if you're clairaudient and you begin to hear, or, you know, even when you would hear people talk about in olden days when they would say that the women were prone to fainting or hysteria, when really it was just them, you know, seeing and saying that they were seeing spirit, but it was shooed away as, being feeble of mind. You know, so, and a lot of times if somebody says, well, I'm hearing voices, they'll say, well, that could be schizophrenia. You need to go get your head checked out, you know. That kind of all of a sudden a voice talking to you, no matter if it's a loving and benevolent voice of your guide, that certainly could be like, oh, my gosh. You know, and did you have anyone to talk to about, or just the internet in terms of trying to figure out what the heck was going on?
No, I had a psychic that I was working with, and she really helped me understand. But as far as the clairaudience, the best way I can describe it is there was constant conversations going on in my head. And I think a lot of psychics can relate to this. The hardest part about being psychic and living in this world down here in the 3D as a psychic is learning to recognize and silence that ego and know when your guides are actually talking to you. Because if it is coming from your ego, you're just talking to yourself. So I was constantly having these conversations in my head, and it took me a while to recognize and say to myself, okay, this is me talking to myself. And now I can recognize when it's coming from divine channel and when I'm getting divine guidance as opposed to my ego.
And also as opposed to communicating with your twin telepathically, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes, that is a different connection. I hear him, the best way I can describe it is I hear him not in my head, but I hear him in my heart. I hear him in my heart chakra. That's the best way I can describe it. And it comes through as a feeling, which then gets translated into words.
Okay.
That's how
so it's
me
like
and my twin communicate, through the connection.
And I'm assuming it's taken you then the experience of the journey since your awakening to kind of figure out that that's what was happening in the heart space.
Yes, that took some time as well. But it with him and I, the empathic connection, it started immediately. I started feeling him and hearing him, and it's the same with him. He gets feelings about me. I'm not sure how well he recognizes that yet, but he does get it.
Okay, that's what I was wondering, what your twin's awareness is, and is he also attributing or undergoing a psychic awakening, or does he recognize it as such?
He is.
This is an interesting conversation because there is a unique dynamic to a twin flame journey that is directly related to this particular connection, which we're exploring psychic connections, but it's rather a complex subject as well. So I do know that we will be having you back on as a panelist with a couple other twin flames later on in March. So to anyone in the audience, again, if you have any questions, please do just press the 1 key to come online. So, okay, sorry, pardon my interruption as to your counterpart psychic abilities.
He is empathic. I do believe he is psychic, and he is in the initial stages of awakening. And I'm not sure exactly where he's at with that because he's not very communicative with me with regards to that, but I have been given divine guidance that he is in the initial stages of awakening, and he's gone through a pre-awakening stage, I believe, last year. So they are getting him ready for that. So as far as his psychic abilities, I don't know where he's at with that, but I believe he will open up to those as well.
Well, absolutely. I mean, if you have as been the companion in the twin flame journey always mirrors back that energy. It just looks somewhat different, That's one thing I like to encourage people is that everyone's psychic or the abilities of all that we are as energetic beings, which is what I believe we refer to as psychic senses, as if there's something external to our normal senses. I believe that it's all part of our integrated sensory system, and that we can just kind of bloom to more consciously embrace these things that we have been given with which to process and experience our reality, So being able to connect with guidance through hearing, or being able to have seeing beyond the 3D visible of a situation, those things are really meant to be of assistance to us so that our lives are hopefully filled with less friction or problems, So the word psychic tends to put people off. Do you embrace that term for yourself in the sense of how you're describing this aspect?
Yes. And
okay.
Just to piggyback off of your point, we are all born spiritual beings. I believe that psychic means essentially is raising your consciousness, and it is destroying that ego and raising your vibration up. The more we do that, the more we are in tune with divine guidance.
Now,
so we are all born spiritual beings.
Well, in terms of like divine guidance and being connected, I know that in the Christian faith there are certain, denominations that have a belief system of angels in the angelic realm, like Catholics. They're very strongly tied to angels, whereas like I grew up Methodist and there was not a big deal about angels. And, every church kind of has different beliefs about what happens to you when you die and so on and so forth. Within your Hindu spiritual practice, is there psychic as a topic? And I'm asking because also in the Christian perspective, there's a lot of conflict about, what Scripture says as to connecting with guides or mediumship or, all those things. And so sometimes it causes a tension in a person's spiritual or faith system. Did you have an alignment of Hindu spiritualism that already kind of supported the flowering of these gifts?
Yes, and when you look at metaphysics, it's really grounded in Hinduism, starting with the idea of your chakras. That is a Sanskrit term that literally means wheel. So a lot of it, as I started learning about it, is grounded in Hinduism. But what I can tell you and our listeners is when we go up there, it's all non-denominational. Everybody up there works together. So it's just only down here in the 3D that we have denominations and religions. But up there, it's just spiritual. And I think that's part of what awakening and becoming psychic and practicing energy is about, is learning that spirituality is a much bigger picture than religion. This is not religion. This is spirituality. So it's very different. And I try to, yes, I am grounded in the Hindu faith, but as I've opened up, I have opened up that mindset to embrace everything. Because up there, it's all the same. There are no denominations up there in the divine realm.
Right. And that's, I would say I'm 47. So, in my 20s, there still was very much a movement of religion, but it was becoming non-denominational, and like the era of the non-denominational megachurch kind of happened then in my 20s and 30s. But then we kind of have shifted to where I have more friends who say, oh, I'm more spiritual than religious, or I do my own thing. It's kind of a blend. I think more and more people are absolutely saying that, and that's the energy, I think, as we're in this new age of Aquarius, so to speak, and away from the Piscean era, that more and more people are like, I'm good. I don't need anybody else to enter in between for me. I'm going to work with whoever I'm working with, my creator, my God, my goddess, my whatever, and I'll leave the rest of the stuff for other people. I think it's very much I'm excited about that, because I think many of the older structures did have less personal relationship. And when you are hearing your guidance and receiving it through your body, through your clairsentience, that is absolutely like the purest of spirit connection, which is really what in essence we are. So, I think that's a beautiful thing that you're able to merge the two. And within your family, is that the case? Do your friends and family know that you're a psychic, or has there been any challenges in your environment, personal environment, as to your awakening?
Yes. When I first came out and told my parents I was psychic, there was a little pushback, and that was some ego, fear energy, because it was a lack of understanding. I think they are starting to come into it a little bit more. I have lost friends that have fallen off in the past 2 years, just energetically, because the frequency was different. So there are people who just aren't going to get this. And when you look at fear with regards to this, it is based on ignorance. It is a lack of understanding. And I think it's going to take a long time for people to start to understand what this is, just as a collective. And like you stated, as more and more people are moving towards being more spiritual as opposed to religion, I think that's going to open up a little bit more.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But yes, to answer your question, I did definitely get pushback from people.
Okay. And as you went through like your own personal, oh my gosh, what just happened to me? How did you come to the point to say, okay, now I'm going to become professional in terms of I'll offer my guidance to people, and to even be then at the psychic fair? How do you go from that I'm going mad to I'm sitting at the psychic fair?
Exactly. So I took a class, and I was certified in Sandi Anastasi's psychic development system, and that was a 5-month course that I took. And I learned all about ethics, which is everything when you do psychic work. And after I took that class and graduated, I just decided I wanted to do readings part-time. And that's how I started doing this, because I knew that I was being called to do this work, not full-time psychic, but that this was going to be part of my life, and that my guides are slowly integrating and connecting the dots between lawyer and psychic.
And that is the juicy part. That's why I said, okay, let's talk about your personal connections, because you are actually a practicing attorney. And I will say this is the first time that I have met a person on that side of the law. Now, we've had psychics who help the police do investigations, and let me tell you, it's something that the police don't broadcast, that they're calling these folks to see if they can help them. So here we are now. You're an attorney who's practicing law. Now, I understand that you were operating your empathy. You said you had that very early on, so I would assume that during your legal career, your empathy, probably, were you using it already kind of without realizing that it was part of your psychic spectrum?
Yes. And I can tell you, empaths always have a keen feeling and understanding of when people are lying to them. So I always knew when people were lying to me, and I could always pick up on lower energy, people who were just not all there or just really had bad intentions. I could pick up on that. And all empaths can pick up on that. So I was already utilizing that without knowing that I was. Okay.
And the type of legal work that you are doing, this is like your professional established career. So because your psychic awakening was fairly recent, if I'm correct, that you've been in the legal world for many years.
Yes, I am a criminal defense attorney.
So
and
my question is, if you're a criminal defense attorney, does the empathy, I guess it would seem like if you were a prosecutor, like your ability to like say he's lying on the stand or something like that. You know what I'm saying? To call, it would just seem like you would be in the prosecutor's avenue, but you're in the defense attitude. So before your client even tells you anything, you would be able to know where sense their guilt, or at least energy signature would be saying something is a little not truthful. I don't know. How did it work before you knew that you were doing? Was it like I have a gut feeling about it and I'm going to change my strategy based on this feeling I have, or was it just kind of like passively part of your processing?
Well, as a criminal defense attorney, I always get the client's story, but that doesn't mean that that's what I'm going to present, obviously. That's a strategy move for an attorney. And I have learned through years of practice that what I think happened doesn't really matter. It's not for me to judge, and this lesson has come especially through to me as I have awakened and become psychic, that just from an ethical standpoint as a psychic and a lawyer, it's not my place to judge. I don't judge my clients. I'm there to protect their constitutional rights. That's my job. But when I need to get the real truth of the story, because no criminal defense attorney wants their clients lying to them. It's like going to your doctor and lying to your doctor. You know, I need to know what happened so I can help you and come up with a strategy. So that's kind of how I use that.
I was thinking about, as you were talking about, that kind of exchange where you would be talking with your clients, it seems like you would have a lot of very close exposure to fear and what fear causes people to do, or how they respond or try to protect themselves when they are feeling fearful. It seems like that's a real crucible for observing, and then also observing, really, because a lot of what you're doing is you're talking to people, like you're seeing either they're afraid of you and they're not telling the truth, or they're afraid of what the repercussions for what they did, or they're afraid that they'll be misunderstood and then found guilty. I mean, that seems like a really intense, energetic kind of position to be in, especially as an empath. Did you have any adverse effects to your emotional or physical self in your early part of being in that world?
Well, what happens is when you start to open up and awaken, you become hypersensitive to energy. And my guides always, they protect us when that happens because your energy becomes vulnerable. But also, when I took the classes, I learned how to maintain and protect my own energy. And when you are psychic, you have to maintain and protect your energy, and it does take maintenance. And it took me a while to understand that I am psychic first and lawyer second, that this is something that needs to be maintained and honed and controlled. And I learned that lesson the hard way. When my energy got thrown off, when I used to slack on protecting my energy, and I used to absorb negative energies, I learned the lesson the hard way, that I need to maintain a little bit more than what I initially thought it was going to take. Because in the beginning, I thought that, okay, I can be psychic in the evening after work and be a lawyer during the day. And my guides taught me very clearly that, no, you are psychic always. So I learned that the hard way.
Did you get ill or?
No, it was basically what would happen was when I wasn't maintaining my energy, I would get thrown off when I needed to perform in a certain way in court, and my client's energy would be throwing me off, or somebody else's energy would be tripping me up, and I'm like, okay, this is what's going on. I need to block and shield and maintain my energy properly, so I'm not picking up on other people's energy, because that's basically what an empath is. We absorb everybody's energy. So if we're not protecting that, it starts to build up, and we can just feel very anxious. It's an anxiety.
Right. Well, that seems like you have a lot of, just as an attorney, you're in the court, you're looking and judging like you're the jury that is receiving the information. If you're in a jury trial, you're processing what the judge's energy is, what your client's energy is, what the opposition's energy is, just as part of doing your lawyerly job on a regular basis. We've all seen Matlock, you know what I mean, and all the other TV shows where of what's going on in a trial. You have to use that. So it seems like it would definitely be a challenge, is like doing it regularly and then having it be over into the area where it becomes the drain or the problematic, overwhelm kind of situation. It seems like it's very nuanced to navigate.
It can be. I always call in divine guidance anytime I walk into a courtroom or do anything. Basically, I have learned how to talk to my guides, and that was a learning process for me to ask for help. I ask for help for basically everything, because we always have to ask for help because there is free will involved. So I'm constantly asking for help, and they will always guide me. I open up my channel, and the clairaudience will start to come in. When I need help with an argument or words or anything, they will help me speak and get the right words out. So I have learned how to simultaneously do everything. It was an art that I needed to learn. How to be, it's literally being in two places at once, because I'm down here in the 3D, but I'm also open up my channel, and I'm also up there at the same time. And I'm having three conversations at once.
But you are finding that it's getting easier, or you're getting better at it. I think you made reference to that.
Definitely, I am. And when people awaken, they never stop. There will be a leveling off, and then you awaken again. So I have leveled off a bit for the time being, and then there will be more ascension and awakening after a little while. So they do give you breaks.
Yes.
But it's taken me 2 years. It was a 2-year, and it was that very initial where they were just literally just pulling me up, and it was very jarring, and it was very hard for me because it was a huge amount of growth that happened in not a lot of time. And dealing with the twin flame was a big, big part of that for me.
Absolutely. That's one of those unavoidable kind of things that while you're balancing all the other things of self in this elephant in the room, is that you have an energetic counterpart that catalyzed all of this in the first place, that still is energy to be experienced. I can't say dealt with or reckoned with, because it's not necessarily like that, but it certainly is a whole new vein of exchange that I'm assuming takes quite a lot of energy as well to balance in your reality. I always tell
all
people
of my energy.
Well, I was laughing because when you were talking about, approaching life, when I hear people say stay woke, I always giggle, because it is actually an active way of being. Once you kind of step fully into, I am going to consciously experience this and work to elevate myself and take the reins, like you said, you may get some lulls where you're not galloping away down, or once you've taken the reins, but you're always then at a point of having the reins firmly in hand. So it's a lot more active way of being than to be numb and oblivious to all of these ways that we could be experiencing more in our realities. So I giggle because people say it like it's an easy thing to, get with their twin flame and stay awake and active on a journey. And it is really, it's like working your core muscles. There's a lot of little fine muscles that are being used. There's a lot of little aspects of the self that if you are going to stay consciously in charge of yourself, there's a lot of little pieces that have to be maintained in that balanced position. I enjoy it now that I would assume like the cycles of intense, oh my God, are not as deep as they once were, that things are overall likely to be kind of evening out from as bumpy as they were 2 years ago, for sure. Yes, it's like, do you have a sense of anticipation, or do you have a sense of having moved through into something different after having gone through this crucible, or do you think it was just a typical kind of experience that you will then continue to have repeating to that same degree of intensity that you had before?
Well, I can tell you what I have learned in my twin flame dynamic and through awakening is that we are all here to learn our lessons. Every single one of us are down here to learn our lessons. And with regards to the twin, there was a lot of lessons I needed to learn about love and myself. And it was very hard. I think it's very hard for twins in the beginning, especially the feminine, because there is always that push-pull energy that's going on. And that was going on with him and I, and it's just now starting to settle a little bit. But the hardest lesson is understanding that this is not a 3D relationship. It defies everything we know about relationships. Twins don't date. They don't even talk. So to understand that we need to see this higher, especially for the feminine, because the feminine does everything first. We're always in the lead. We awaken first, we heal first, and then we raise up, and then we pull them up, is to understand that we need to see this higher, that it's not about when am I going to see him or when am I going to talk to him. It's about looking at it higher on an energetic level. And that took me a long time to understand. And also that this is something that we have signed up to do for the rest of our lives. This is a long-term life path thing. And it's not something that is going to happen in a month or 6 months or a year or 2 years. This is something that we have signed up to work on for the rest of our lives. So it's not going to look like anything else in the 3D. And that was something that took me a long time to really, truly understand.
You know, I have to say, I do know twins, and I always hate to use like stark black and white statements about twins and what they are and are not, because I do actually know many twins, more than maybe some people, who are actually in their romantic partnership, in their romantic dynamic, in a union state harmoniously, although that has not always been the case, for at least 2 to 3 couples that I personally know. They certainly did have their share of healing and separation and uncovering the wounds. But there certainly is, for some twins, a dynamic of romantic interaction that is able to be achieved. But I definitely understand not wanting to serve up the whole concept of twin flame as a love story in terms of the romantic Hollywood type of thing, because it certainly is not that, you know. But
it is not that, at least in the very beginning stages. And from what I have been given divine guidance on is that there are levels for twins. And I believe that is based on how advanced the soul is. And I can speak for my twin and myself. What I do know is that him and I, we had some very heavy negative karma to break. Because when you think of twins, you have the soul connection as well as the karma. So it is a karmic connection as well. So him and I had some very, very heavy negative karma to balance out. And from what I have been told with regards to me and my twin, is that there is no guarantee that him and I will come into union in this lifetime. That this is about timelines and this is about free will. So I always keep that in mind. That, this is about balancing out karma, and for him and I, at least, this is about moving towards peace.
That is, it's very interesting, and we could spend the whole hour talking about like the whole twin flame thing, because it is significant. And for people who are on this show, listening, this is about uncovering our gifts and abilities and whatever that looks like. And we are in a time when people are not just awakening to, say, their clairvoyance or their higher aspect. They're able to connect with other aspects of ourselves. We're finding more and more past, if you use a timeline sensitive kind of description, past life energies are coming through for people where they're beginning to understand that they might have lived before in certain times, or we are starting to uncover these previous connections to friends and loved ones. That's more of a common kind of conversation than it once would have been, 20, 30 years ago. So if you feel like you were, from another planet, that you're not even from Earth, then maybe that's a star seed. Maybe if you are hearing things and seeing beyond the veil, then the term is psychic. And we've had many guests on this show who are connecting not just with angels and loved ones in the astral plane. They're or higher realms. They're also connecting with what we would call extraterrestrials or angelic or archangels, and receiving clairaudience and all this guidance from the higher realms of love. People are experiencing it in lots of different ways. So if you're thinking, oh my goodness, I've got this other energetic half of myself that I now have become aware of out in the world, many people would say, you've definitely gone mad. If you say, well, a part of me resonates with having been a Pleiadian, then people could definitely say, well, you know what, I think you've gone a little mad. So these are challenging things that we're just now learning by having conversations with people who have experienced awakenings, who are now having to manage being their whole self, right, their true self. And you mentioned to me in our, preliminary conversations that it was very important to you to be able to exist in your truth, despite any ideas as to, like being an attorney or your faith or the friends around you. And, even embodying that name, the destroyer of fear, to stand in that. I am so glad that you're here to have this conversation this evening. And I think that it's essential that the people who you are encountering out there in your profession, defending people who've been accused of a crime, that is very much a light worker way of helping humanity. I'm sure the people who sit across the table from you, or across the bars or the cell, and this is their opportunity to talk to you, I'm certain that they see you as a life jacket or a lighthouse or some kind of saving influence in their life. Do you feel that your call to justice is part of your mission work?
It's interesting you ask that question because when my twin came into my life, everything started making sense to me as far as experiences and people I had dealt with in my whole life. Everything kind of started making sense. And what I got from divine guidance is that being a criminal defense attorney is my divine purpose, to balance out justice in a way, because he stands on the opposite side of the justice scale. We are opposite professionally. And part of this divine purpose for me is because of him. So a lot of my life, if not everything, is really tied to my twin. And I'm starting to see that everything is tied to him energetically and karmically.
So in terms of balancing out then between the two aspects, would you characterize him as also being a lighthouse in his environment?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. And he does it in an opposite way from what I do it. It is about justice.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. So we are both very closely associated with justice, and that's no coincidence. That is
right.
Divine purpose for both of us.
And you've mentioned also earlier, it's interesting because, justice, you also mentioned ethics, which I absolutely feel that they're cousins. They're closely related terms, but they speak to different parts of a person's framework. I, as I've shared with you and my audience may know, I came from an environment of being a librarian in a law firm environment, a law librarian, also being a law librarian for the public to be able to find out about laws and things. And of course, most of it was civil research that people were doing, but there certainly were people who, even out at the jail who were receiving legal library services to help kind of understand their rights and what the laws were that they were being charged with. And one thing that challenged me is that while it may have been legal to sentence a person to death, and for the people of the jury who might have felt that that was the justice necessary for what the person was accused of, my personal ethics did not feel good providing research that ultimately supported those that wanted to put to death this person for their crimes. I found it very challenging to balance personally contributing my energy to things that were legal that did not match my frequency of ethics and morals. Have you encountered any tension?
Yes, and this is part of the way I'm having to reconcile the divine realm and the 3D world. Is I've learned that every single one of us have our own life paths. We all sat down, every single one of us sat down with karmic council. There's something called the Lords of Karma, that we sat down with them before we came down here and incarnated down here, and we decided what karma we're going to pay off. And what I learned, what I came to understand with regards to the law and seeing clients, and I'm very anti-death penalty and against mass incarceration because I feel that this country has a huge mass incarceration problem. But what I came to understand from a spiritual place is that God not only has to protect us down here, he's protecting our soul's evolution. So certain people have to go through certain things so that their soul can evolve in the next life, and that we chose our life path. So there's lots of things that we chose, and that God doesn't punish us. That's not punishment. That is for our soul to evolve in the next life. There are certain things that we have to go through. It's all about graduation of the soul, because it's not just about this life. It's about the graduation of the soul. That's what we're all here to do. So the next life can come about better.
Absolutely. I never had, I've not heard it described as you put it. I think it's very interesting to extend that ripple kind of outward to, as I'm envisioning it, would be to say, if in this particular cycle of, say, 50 to 75 years, which would be, say, maybe 2 generations, maybe 3 generations, 4 generations of people who might have had not only like father and son incarcerated and mother, daughter incarcerated. There's 2 aspects of that. There is the fact that we as a collective people have co-created a reality where mass incarceration exists in the first place, right? Which is a statement as to us to say, do we want to be that society? You know, and I think through what you're talking about and the information that has been coming to light about the levels of incarceration that we have, that is why people are saying, wait, no, this is not who we want to be. We need to figure out a different way to punish people and to deal with this. That's like the one hand of correcting what we as a society think is okay. And on the other hand, if you say that those generations, say it's 2 generations or 3 generations, if they're able to pay the debt karmically through their incarceration, if I'm understanding you correctly, that say through going through a situation that ended them up in jail in mass numbers, that when they return next lifetime, these mass numbers of souls that were once incarcerated should be vibrating then at a higher frequency in the same kind of mass degree that we experienced their incarceration. They would now be mass vibrating at a higher level next go round. Would that be?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
And we also have to understand that when we cross over, our souls are still doing work on the other side before we come back and incarnate again. So the soul is always working. Even once we cross over, we're still doing work on the other side.
You're active. Right.
Yes.
Yes. Well, you know, they say that the baby boomer, like the World War Ones, the souls that were here during World War One and the first eras of like truly terrible kind of global situation, that the young kids who started coming in like the 80s and 90s and more recently are a lot of those souls, and they are not going to be supporting politics and governance that would send 19 million young men off to their deaths like they did in 2 successive wars in the first part of this century, that we are going to be experiencing a more peaceful shift because those generations learned the lessons of what wartime price was in terms of loss of life. I think that's good if we've got these old souls returning with a shifted energy. I think that's awesome too, you know.
Yes.
Very,
yes.
very
and
interesting.
I can tell you it's especially true for twins, that twins, as they awaken, they're healing generational curses and also their entire lineage. They're breaking karma. And I have had ancestors of my twin come into me through mediumship. And from what I've understood from them is my twin is healing them because they have passed on in very tragic, traumatic ways pre-Civil War time. And he is now healing them and those generational curses and that karma and healing those souls as well. And he will be doing so for his entire lineage to follow.
Absolutely. So the energy of the twin is to come to unconditional love as a frequency, which, as we know, source is then just love energy. So to unify to a point with an energy that would seem to be external to you, that is actually not, it's actually part of you, that really is the lesson in the micro for the macro, because we're all moving to a place where humanity will realize there is no separation between us as people, as plant, as air, as land. There truly is no separation. It is all one energy. And so twins are really embodying this in a real and tangible way by pushing through the obstacles of their family karma and dynamics and things that they were born into. Oftentimes twins are in intense situations, like in your case being attorneys and, challenging places, nurses and doctors, people who are having to do a lot to show that unconditional love does exist. And it definitely is an inside job. You had to kind of understand and accept yourself that you had not suddenly gone mad. Having true love for yourself is to say, well, no, this is me. This is what is happening to me right now. I am not crazy for thinking this. I accept and love myself. That's the first thing that your twin triggering your gifts kind of lines up for you. Is like, I'm not who I thought I was. Turns out I've got a lot more going on. Can I love all of this about myself? And that to me is the essence of every day after your awakening, is to say how hard, the hardest to love. The hardest to love is ourself. After we can figure out we love ourselves, then it becomes easier to love the rest of humanity, And it's certainly dealing with criminals or people who have been labeled criminals. I hate to even call them criminals. Of course, there are guilty people in and amongst the people you see, but I would just say, the people who encounter you, who've gone through a situation where they've fallen on the criminal side of our societal structure. That's challenging because you have to love the being while being aware of that being's activities, which may not have been the highest vibration. But you still have to provide them the legal representation to which they are entitled. It seems like one really big, massive exercise for yourself that you're doing day to day to be an attorney as you are.
Well, I can tell you I've never had a problem with that as being an attorney and dealing with my clients. But what I can tell you from a spiritual place is God is everything. God is love. Ego is fear. And fear and love just cannot exist on the same plane. They just can't. So if you want to be in a divine place, in a high energy, in a high vibration, everything you should do is from a universal place of love, which includes non-judgment. And that is what Lord Shiva is about. The third eye, he controls the third eye chakra, which is the eye that you look from with non-judgment. So I don't judge my clients because everybody's on our own life path. So it's not for me to judge my clients. And the fact of the matter is, Joelle, is that, and I've always felt this when I was a new attorney, is I wasn't there. I don't know what happened, and neither was that judge, and neither was that prosecutor. The only people who know is the client and God, and I don't know what happened. And my job is to go into court and defend their constitutional rights, and that's what I do. I do not judge people. I do not judge my clients. So I always try to act from a place of non-judgment when it comes to my work.
Has that ever been challenged?
With regard to clients?
I guess I'm thinking of various movies where there's that one person who truly is like so heinous that you're like, wow, woo, you know.
I can honestly tell you, and I'm not speaking from any hilltop here, and I think this is true only because this is my divine purpose, is to be a criminal defense attorney. That has not happened to me.
Okay.
And I think it's only because it is my divine purpose. I have not fallen into that.
Okay.
Because I've had all types of clients.
Okay.
So
it's really like because you're in the line of service, I guess what I've always found is the people who I've always been brought to the right person for the right job at the right time. So I would assume that the cases that you're assigned or that you agree to represent are the ones that Spirit needs for you to be the person so that this person gets the most just outcome.
And this is what I've been told again through divine guidance. I can admit I used to be like a lot of other attorneys. I would go into court and want to win. And that was very ego-driven. And now when I represent clients and do my work, it's not about whether I win or lose. It's let his will be done. Karmically or whatever that is that needs to get balanced out, that's not something I need to know about. It's, you know, when I go in, I just say, let your will be done. And sometimes I win and sometimes I lose, and that's fine. But that's how it needed to turn out. So, yeah, that's how I look at it now. I try not to be in that ego-driven place where I need to look like the smartest, best attorney in the courtroom and win. So it's really about let God's will be done.
That's very good. I'm going to actually be working through that some more because the emotional aspect of the feeling of justice, of wanting justice, I think probably would be coloring my experience more than the way that you're describing approaching it. You know, it's like a step more into a neutrality that I know I'm going to be working on that. Thank you, because it's already got my space kind of whirling. I found like as a consultant, it was easy to say, okay, I gave you my best opinion, here's your report, and then I walk away, and if you implement it, cool. If you don't, cool. I already made my consultancy fee, right? That's in the business world, that worked good for me, but like when it comes to things such as right and wrong, my personal kind of indignation, I want to wave a banner for justice is my personal tendency. And what you're speaking of is a lot more neutral and just kind of trusting that you are going to be fulfilling the role of justice in whatever happens anyway.
Right, because when you think about the term justice, we need to look at it as a divine term. It's not about here in the physical realm. It's about may God's will be done. Because justice, if we get fixed on that term in the 3D realm, that becomes very ego-driven. And that's where people have a hard time forgiving. When I see victims of crimes, they have a hard time forgiving and finding peace because they feel like they're making some concession to the other person. But that is about self-love. Forgiveness, what people don't understand is you forgive somebody for you. We don't forgive somebody and make a concession for the other person. We forgive for ourselves so we can find peace with ourselves. And energetically, that will come to the other person on an energetic level. So it really starts with us.
Back to that inside job again. Funny.
Yeah, when you see people who are executed, and I see interviews of, the families, the victims or the families, and 2 minutes after it's over, they feel the same way. 20 years later, They feel the same way.
Right.
They don't feel any different.
Right.
And it's because they weren't able to forgive, and they don't have that peace yet. And that poor guy is dead and gone. He's moved on. And the people down here are still struggling because they haven't found peace, because they haven't been able to forgive. And the forgiveness is for themselves. That's, you forgive for yourself. You're not making concession for somebody else. And that's what a lot of people see forgiveness as.
Right.
That's not what it is. So what you said is absolutely correct.
Yeah,
love really starts with us first. Because you cannot, there's a saying that says you can't love somebody else until you love yourself. That is completely true, and that is something I had to learn in my own twin journey, is I can't love him the way he needs to be loved until I'm loving myself correctly.
Right. Now, okay, 2 questions. So, have you ever had a loved one of any of your clients try to communicate with you around while you've been working with them? I guess it's like, has there been an intersection of the two where somebody's grandma was like, oh, Sonny, he's always been in trouble, let him know we love him? Or is it pretty much...
Oh, yeah, I get communications from clients' family members all the time, and I have to mark that boundary line because there's ethics involved and attorney-client privilege is involved. But I do speak to families as far as the process is concerned, especially with the younger ones when it's their first time being in the system and they don't know what's going on. The family is concerned, so I do talk to families. But
I meant like deceased loved ones. Like you mentioned you're a medium. Do you communicate with ancestors who passed on?
Oh, I see what you're saying. You're saying mediumship.
Yeah, medium. I'm talking about in the mediumship sense.
Okay, I'm sorry. So, and that's another thing. With regards to mediumship and protecting yourself energetically, people will start to come in and talk. And when I come home, when I pull into my garage, I talk to the Archangel Michael, and I say, please don't let anybody into my house that doesn't need to be here. And that was, like I was talking about earlier, something that I had to learn how to do and not get lazy about, because people will start to come in and talk. Like, I've been trying to go to sleep at night and people are talking, and I'm like, okay, who are you? So, yes, people do come in because souls will find that you are a medium and you are a conduit, and they will start to come in.
Okay. So it's not necessarily like the client, like say somebody who you just encountered or you're going to be encountering, their grandfather shows up ahead and it's like, thank you for working with my grandson or anything like that.
No, it does happen that way too. Okay. I could be sitting with anybody and people will start to come in and talk.
Okay.
But I always ask my guides, ethically, am I supposed to be giving this message to this person? Because, again, free will is involved. I don't want to, I don't know what the history is between these two people, so I don't want to push anything on anybody that's not supposed to be happening. So I always get divine guidance on that. And, again, that is ethics of being a psychic.
That was my second question that I wanted to bookmark. Is you talked about that before, and your school of psychic development that you went to definitely emphasized that. I know where I received my instruction, they also talked about that. Could you describe then what is ethical use of your psychic gifts? Could you talk about that framework?
Yes, absolutely. So first of all, the biggest rule is no third-party information. And what that means is when I'm doing a psychic reading for somebody, a lot of people want to know, what's my husband doing behind my back, or what's my wife doing, or what are my kids doing? I can't give that information. I only give information with regards to children or kids if they're underage, minors. With regards to spouses or friends or anybody else, I always try to bring the reading back to how does this affect your life and what can you do? Because a good psychic always empowers the client. So it's not about what somebody else is doing, it's about what you should be doing in your life. But I will not give that information out unless my guides specifically tell me, and that has not happened. So third-party information is definitely off limits. Typically, when there comes a question like that from a client, I will go up and ask, okay, what do they need to know? Not what they necessarily what they want to know, but what do they need to know?
Right.
So third-party information is off limits. As far as empath is concerned, empaths have the ability to float around, so to speak. And that is off limits as well. You can't go floating into somebody's house or personal space just because you're wondering what they're doing. We're not allowed to do that because this is a gift, and they will take this gift away if it is not used ethically. They will take this gift away, and there are lots of psychics who aren't ethical in their practice. So,
I mean, I would assume it was very much kind of like attorney-client privilege that you already understood from your legal career, that, privacy of conversations, non-disclosure to others as to what is contained in the conversation that you have with clients. It seems pretty similar.
It is very similar. Yes. Basically, the line is, I can't tell you that.
Well, it is interesting because I know if you're doing work with twin flame clients, as I am, the significant other's energy is going to show up anyway. And in most people's lives, their significant heart-centered connection, be it child or boss or lover position, is going to likely show up in a reading anyway, because we're humans, we're connected to things. But the nuance of why I can't tell you A through Z about a third party sometimes is lost, on people. But it's we're not ever in isolation really. So people connections do come through. It's such a slippery slope with, I understand why, priests and the Catholics and stuff, they're like, this is sacred when you enter this box, having an understanding of when you're allowing people into your most intimate of intimate areas. And I think that our spiritual self is way more intimate than our sexual self, or, it encompasses everything. So that's a very fragile, can be, and vulnerable place to be in. And as a advisor, a psychic advisor, and also an attorney representing people when their freedom is at stake, those are highly charged energy dynamics to be existing in. A lot is at stake for people in those situations, and knowing that the person that is counseling you or representing you and connecting with you is of the highest integrity and ethics as they are engaging in this with you is absolutely something that is important. And I know that's what makes me come back to different readers or advisors of any type, is when I know that you are in an upright and positive aspect fulfilling those roles that you have. And kudos to you for being in that environment, helping people who clearly are going to, this is like freedom or incarceration question for most of them when they're engaging with you. And even from spiritually, being spiritually liberated as they're working with you, if they're working just strictly through a psychic capacity. It sounds so unique, and I mean, I'm very excited to connect with you because this is quite different from other interviews that I've had, the way that you are balancing those dynamics in a place of real, I've just been seeing a person in the middle of a teeter-totter, in this kind of Zen space where both sides are balanced, and I've been given some learning frameworks from having this conversation with you about how I can increase my frequency to do that, because it would cause me less internal conflict. A lot of it has been internal challenges with myself, is where to find that balance. And so, I appreciate the perspective that you've brought in. It's a lot of food for thought. I mean, is there anything that you would sum up to a person who is in, say, a straight-laced environment, such as being an attorney, as to how to step more fully into their truth?
I would say to people who are awakening and who have real other careers going on or lives that does not involve being full-time psychic, to give yourself some grace and some patience to reconcile both worlds, because eventually we will see everything from a spiritual place, and that is because your vibration is increasing and going up, and your frequency is increasing, and you are ascending. Because the truth of the matter is, we are all spiritual beings, and everything is a spiritual lesson. When we start to see what the lesson is with everything, that is spirituality right there. Even with the most trivial things that happen in our day, there is a lesson there. And when we can look for the lesson, we move faster. I can tell you for myself, before I started awakening, I used to love to have these pity parties for myself. I was very much a woe is me type person. And I never understood the concept of the lesson. And when I started awakening, I realized, okay, what's the lesson here? And when I started asking and looking for it, it started coming to me much quicker, and I would move through things much quicker. And we are all down here to learn the lessons. And just getting that concept by itself is spirituality. That is spirituality right there in and of itself.
Mm-hmm.
And eventually,
so they call it
both worlds. Mm-hmm.
Well, I've heard it called Earth School. I always love that kind of way of looking at it. You come here to learn lessons like it's a full-time school. That's
right. Because when you look at it spiritually, nothing starts down here. Nothing starts down here. When we decide even just to lose 20 pounds, we decide we want to lose weight, we don't just wake up one day and decide that. That started up there from a spiritual place. And your guides have been working on you subconsciously, saying, okay, you need to make this change, because emotional energy is the most powerful energy there is, and we have to align with that energy. So that takes time. So nothing really starts down here in the 3D. Everything starts up there. Mm-hmm. Everything starts up there, because we are all
as above, so below.
Yes. And I just want to make one concept very clear to everybody who's listening, is that our higher selves, they are fearless. Okay? We come down here to experience ego and fear, to learn how to overcome that. Mm-hmm. So everything that comes in our life is because we are meant to overcome it. Spirit never gives us what we cannot handle. Mm-hmm. Never. So we are here to experience fear and learn how to overcome that ego, because our higher selves, our divine selves, is fearless.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That makes absolute sense. And the perspective of even being, it's like an adult to children, like school-age children, right? Not to necessarily say that we're that exactly, but an adult will tell a child, look, when you grow up, there's not going to be anything to fear. You're going to be okay. But to a kid, from the perspective that they're at, driving a car and being adulting looks hard, and it can make them be fearful. But as they learn and grow, by the time they're 18, then they're no longer, it does not seem as intimidating. They're more aware and able to approach their world differently than, say, when they're 7 or 8 years old, when everything's so scary and unknown. And to me, that's really very much like, as we're growing and elevating, we're getting older, moving through our adolescence into spiritual adulthood, where we will be at that frequency of, hey, I'm a grown-up, I've got all the tools, and I know how to avail myself, and I can do this thing called life. I think that's very much how our spiritual awakening happens, when we realize, wait a second, I am a creator being. And not only that, I don't need to be afraid of that which I am creating, for myself. I think it's very interesting when you are seeing your clients for your psychic professional side. What kind of person typically, what does it look like if I call you up and say, okay, I'd like an appointment? How are you doing readings, or are you also doing coaching? Are you doing any teachings or workshops for people in the psychic capacity?
I give people what they need. So to answer your question, basically, it is whatever I am told to tell them is what I tell them. Psychics really are just a vessel. Like, I'm just the voice. So when I open up my channel and I go up in channel, my guides are just telling me what to say. So if they need more of a spiritual consultation, that's what I give them. And I just get the words, and it's just coming out of my mouth. It's coming from my guides. It's just using my mouth. So I basically just give them whatever they need. If they have specific questions with regards to their life or what's going on, of course I will answer those as well.
Okay.
But some
it's
people
a typical
do
kind of, well, I'll say this is more your typical kind of, I'm contacting you as a reader because I want to have a conversation with you, either by time limit, I guess maybe by an hour kind of engagement.
Yes, I do 30-minute readings. At the Blue Barn, obviously, they're 20 minutes. On the phone, I do 30 minutes and an hour or 90 minutes. And especially people who are in very difficult situations, whether they're grieving for somebody who they just lost, or somebody they're about to lose who's about to cross over, or a difficult relationship. A lot of times I find that those people just need some spiritual guidance as far as what does this all mean type. Yeah, that's typically the type of reading. It's not so much about a question-answer type session. It's about what does this all mean spiritually.
Okay. I just wanted to get a sense, because I don't like to presume how people are deploying their gifts. Some people do coaching, some people do reading, some people, it's just a real grab bag. So are people able to reach you through a website, or how would they contact you for one-on-one services?
I am on Instagram at Shiva Jahaan. Instagram. Also, I can give my phone number. I am available by phone or text as well. It is 404-242-1194. And also, you can find me at the Blue Barn once a month.
Yes, the Blue Barn, the Big Psychic Fair is the first weekend of every month. If you are in the Atlanta area or even the Southeast, it draws people from all around. It is up in Roswell Road at you can put in the Blue Barn, or Harmony Place is also a name that is used in some of the mapping services. But that runs from 10 to, is it 6 on Saturday and noon to 5 on Sunday at the Big Blue Barn. Is that correct?
I believe it's 12 to 6 on Sunday.
Yeah, 12 to 6. Okay, I wasn't sure if it was 5 or 6. So I definitely need to know because I will actually be reading this weekend at the Blue Barn as well. Thank you to you for going ahead and nudging me about that because it's been kind of kicking around in my energy. But for those of you who are interested, it's an absolutely wonderful day. Shiva's going to be there. There are going to be probably, I would say, at least 15 to 20 readers that are available. Readings are very affordable. If you've never had a psychic reading before and are curious about what it's like, it's a great place to go to kind of dip your toes in the pool. It's one reading for $15 or two for $25, and those are 20-minute readings. They also have a selection of metaphysical products and vendors there for people to browse while you're waiting for your services. And it's just a wonderful, high vibrational place. I love to go, and as I said, I saw your information there, and I can't even tell you how many of the interviews that I've done have been people who either were at the Blue Barn at one point or went to the same psychic development school that you attended here. Do you have any advice for a person who is seeking out, maybe they're not in the Atlanta area, who wants to understand their newfound gifts? Do you have any advice about schooling or furthering oneself in a more formal sense?
Yes, I took Carl Woodall's class for psychic development. He teaches the Sandi Anastasi system. I would recommend him. He's very well known, definitely in the Southeast and also nationally. His name is Carl Woodall. He teaches the classes about every 5 or 6 months. The course lasts 5 months. It's 1 week in a month. So I definitely would recommend Carl Woodall.
Mm-hmm.
And I
did
believe
you feel
a lot
like
of the readers. I'm sorry?
Well, so did you feel like the education really sealed something for you in terms of shifting you into a new place?
Yes, and the truth of the matter is my guides aligned me as far as the timeline was concerned to go into Carl's class. So my awakening was timed as far as how his classes was running. So I was meant to take his class, correct. And I think that happens with a lot of people. Their guides, people will get divine guidance on taking his course. And a lot of the readers at the Blue Barn have taken Carl's class and graduated from Carl's class.
Oh, yes. Well, his class has been going on for, 15 years, maybe, or 10 or 15? I mean, it's always seems like there's been Carl Woodalls, and I've been in Atlanta 30-something years.
Yeah, he's very well known, definitely in Atlanta in the metaphysical community. His name is the preemptive name, I believe, so.
Yes. Well, the conversation I want to continue is going to be definitely on the Twin Flame panel. I would love if you would come back and join me to talk about that. For those of you that has kind of sparked an interest, definitely stay tuned. You can join me on Facebook so you can follow, or Instagram, and see when the next episodes are coming up. But I would definitely ask if you would come back and speak more with us about this journey, because I think there's a lot that people who are possibly encountering this unusual energy of connection to another person would find just as helpful as a conversation about coming into awareness of your psychic abilities this evening. So I do invite you to come back for that.
Absolutely. I would love to.
It's a very again, that's very active living when you're realizing you're managing yourself along with another energetic connection. So there's quite a bit to talk about down that vein. I think that for the idea that there are people out there whose gifts and first careers, if you will, have placed them very specifically where their gift and energy is needed and where those people can benefit from what that person is bringing as part of their skill set. As a person who's very much waving that justice flag and wishing for a society that does not incarcerate people en masse, and certainly if not en masse, that not one innocent person ever, experience incarceration. It makes me feel good to know that there's a you out there, because I feel like that person has a better chance at a just outcome because they had a spirit-placed person who's been endowed with a very specific kind of gifts in place in their moment of need. I think that's a beautiful thing.
Yes, and I just want to point out, with regards to dealing with my legal clients, and even anybody outside the psychic realm or psychic clients, when I need help talking to somebody, I always ask, because they'll give me the perfect energy and I'll use their energy and their words to make somebody feel comfortable. Because when I deal with my legal clients, they don't tell me the truth because basically they're afraid of judgment. They're afraid I'm going to judge them and think they're guilty and I'm not going to be able to do my job. And I can pick up on that energy immediately. So I just bring in divine energy and I get the perfect words to make them feel comfortable. Like, okay, this is what I need from you. And just to kind of subconsciously relax them a little bit so they will feel comfortable and speak to me the way I need them to speak to me about their case. So I've really found that has made a huge difference. And I use that, like I said, when I talk to anybody, like, okay, I need some help. Can you guys come in and give me the words? And I use their energy, and it'll just always work out the way it needs to work out perfectly. So I don't have to overthink it afterwards and think, oh, well, I should have said this or I should have said that, because I know that I use their energy, and that's how it needed to happen and turn out.
That takes a great deal of trust.
Yes. I also learned that on my spiritual journey. Trusting my guides. Yes, that was a lesson. Because, Joelle, at the end of the day, what I've learned is we are all spiritual beings, and we should all be living moment to moment in spirit. When we live like that, we're not living by our own ego. It's like, because fear and love cannot exist on the same plane. So you're either driven by your ego or you're living moment to moment in spirit. So I was somebody who had to have everything planned out in my life. I had my week, my entire month scheduled. And if something would come in that wasn't on the schedule, that would really throw me off. And that just was the type of person I was. And what happened was, especially Lord Shiva, he trained me to live moment to moment in him, because he took that away from me. He took that power and control away from me so that I could completely be guided by him. So now I just live moment to moment in him. And the question is always, okay, what would you have me do next? As opposed to, okay, I need to get this done and I need to do this, and this, because that is all ego-driven. So it's always the question, okay, what would you have me do next? And he will tell me. So it did take a great deal of faith and trust.
Yeah, I would say that's the evolution of being. The evolution of the faith exercise is like when you're like, okay, well, I'm doing what you told. You know what I mean? Uh, it takes unlearning to kind of shift out of the previous way of being to that moment by moment, especially in a time-driven reality that's always pushing us to project future, you know.
Right. And when I get into my ego and I get worried because I didn't get something done or I feel like I should have done this, I just remember he's going to get me where I need to go. Like, okay, I didn't get it done today. It's because the energy didn't align. It wasn't meant to happen today. It's going to happen when he tells me to do it. That's when it's going to happen. Right. And the energy just aligns and it just clicks. Instead of me being anxious about it and guilting myself about it, for all that time, I've just learned to trust him that he's going to get me where I need to be.
And you don't even have to see where it's going to be because you just know you're along with wherever he's taking you.
Exactly. And that is part of that whole surrender. I'll tell you, for me, my guides, they don't ever give me the entire game plan up front. Okay? They give it to me in steps. They'll say, okay, do this next, and then do this. Because, you know, I'll wake up and I'll be like, okay, what's the plan for the day? They're like, no, you don't need to know the plan for the whole day. We'll give it to you step by step. Like, okay.
Right. Go make coffee and meditate.
Right, exactly. It's literally step by step.
Well, I am very glad that it aligned for us to make a connection because there was just a series of things that like moved little by little. I can see them now as I look back all the way to January, you know. But that's kind of just the evidence that things are aligned as they should be when they should be. And I know that those who are listening this evening and who will be hearing this in the future, to each of you, I would also say that you're hearing this in the perfect time that has been aligned for you to connect with the information that has been shared this evening. And I definitely would say I'm going to be looking at Shiva differently, and I definitely still have some more research to do because the removal of fear to be able to move more easily through this reality in partnership with Spirit is absolutely something I can co-sign with. I can align and co-sign on all of that you shared this evening. Well, I thank you for coming for the interview. Next Tuesday is another episode of the Psychic Inside Show. My guest will be Miss Cassandra Hanna, who is a palmist. She also has been at the Blue Barn up in Roswell, though I don't think she's been there for a couple of years. But she is a graduate of Woodall's, I believe, program and also well-known in the Atlanta community. So I'm very excited. She's the only palm reader that I know personally. So I'm quite interested to have her on. And my interview this evening with Shiva Jahaan is going to be on the Viberarian YouTube channel. If you've listened there, please do comment, like, and share, and pass this on. And also on the Viberarian Facebook page, we'll have this archive for you. I thank all of you who've come. Shiva, I thank you for sharing your journey this evening. Did you have any last wise words from our conversation to carry forward for people this evening?
Always try to stay in a place of universal love. That's the best advice I can give to people is always try to do your job or in your personal relationships or anything from a place of universal love.
That's harder than most. Well, everybody knows it's hard, but it's attainable, and it is absolutely, I think, where we are moving to. I thank you so much for coming on the air this evening, and
thank
to
you for
each
having
of you
me.
who've been. Oh, absolutely. I'm smiling from ear to ear. My energy, it's like there was so much energy coursing at times when you were talking. I could just feel my heart chakra was very expansive. And so I know that there will be things that will be unpacking for me to help me grow and shift my energy from tonight's conversation. I can already feel the work happening, so I'm kind of excited about that. And I do look forward to seeing you on Saturday at the Blue Barn. And for all of you who are listening, thank you so much for lending your ears this evening. I absolutely wish for you that your next week is filled with all the abundance that you can possibly hold, and that those blessings spill out from your arms into the world around you. The light in me absolutely honors the light in you. Namaste.